The plane of Tarkir is home to 5 clans. With the release of Tarkir Dragonstorm, we are given 5 commander precon decks, 1 for each of the clans. These are excellent ways to affiliate with your preferred clan, and in this series, we're going to be dissecting these decks. We'll be looking at the best new cards from each, the best reprints included, and a handful of cards that you can swap in to begin building them up. This video will focus on the Abzan armor deck, a white, black, and green deck that looks to make a good offense out of our defense. This will be achieved by using several cards that change the way combat damage is handled, using our toughness as the damaging value. Our main commander is Felithar the Steadfast, a 4-mana 0/5 human warrior. She has a continuous ability, letting each creature we control assign their combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. In addition, creatures we control can attack as though they did not have Defender. Finally, for 3 mana, tapping Felithar and sacrificing another creature, we draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness, and then discard cards equal to their power. I love and hate this card. Longtime viewers of the channel will know one of my favorite commanders of all time is Duran the Siege Tower, who has a very similar design. Duran, however, impacts the entire board, rather than just our creatures. Felithar only affects our creatures, which can work to our advantage, but she also comes with 2 additional abilities as trade-off. Her allowing creatures with Defender to attack as though they did not have Defender is a very popular mechanic that recent wall-themed decks have been adding. See, under normal circumstances, creatures with Defender, or older cards that have the creature type Wall, cannot attack. As a result, they don't see a whole lot of playing Commander. We've had a few cards over the last few years, such as Arcades the Strategist, that allow our creatures with Defender to attack. This has given home to a great many cards with Defender, making it a somewhat niche deck type. Felithar allows even the chonkiest of walls to attack, and has an ability where for 3 mana, we can sacrifice a creature to draw cards equal to the sacked creature's toughness, and then we discard cards equal to its power. Betor, Ancestor's Voice, is our backup commander, and is a 5-mana 3/5 Spirit Dragon with flying and lifelink. At the beginning of our end step, we put a number of +1/+1 counters on up to 1 other target creature we control, equal to the amount of life we gained this turn. We return up to 1 target creature card with mana value less than or equal to the amount of life we lost this turn from the graveyard to the battlefield. This plays into the secondary strategy of this deck, life gain. We have a little bit of reanimation on Betor, although we are also playing into an older strategy that Abzan utilized of +1/+1 counters. Betor can be a great way to gain life and use that to bolster our forces. Bigger creatures tend to survive combat better, and if we dump those counters onto something that's already evasive, such as a flyer or an unblockable creature, we can get in for huge swaths of damage. If we have Felithar or a related ability in play, and our toughness will get the boost from the +1/+1 counters as well, that booty will be doing the damage. For the purposes of this video, I will be upgrading the deck using Felithar, though if you found greater success building up Betor, feel free to share your experience in the comments. This video is geared to be a guide to anyone who wants to build with this deck, and so your help is greatly appreciated. In the context of what this deck will want to do, this is incredibly powerful. Felithar rewards you for playing creatures with greater toughness than power. If you sacrifice something like a Steel Wall, a 1-mana 0/4 with Defender, you will draw 4 cards, but then have to discard 0. This card design has been seen on a number of cards in this deck. We have cards like Arboreal Grazer, who have 0 power, but because of Felithar, are relevant in combat because they have a sizable 3 toughness. We can also look at creatures with Defender as possible creatures to go on the offense with, such as Tree of Redemption, who has a tremendous 13 toughness. So let's dig in and look at what the better new cards are from this deck. I won't be looking at financial value so much as the playability value, because if you're going to buy this precon and upgrade it, the financial value really doesn't matter. If a card is worth $15, cool. Is it good in the deck? That's debatable. Starting off, we have Arbor Adherent, a 2/4 dog druid for 4 mana. This is a mana doggy for the deck, allowing you to tap the good boy for 1 mana of any color, or for X mana of any 1 color, where X is the greatest toughness among other creatures you control. This second ability does require that you have some other creatures in play to look at those toughnesses, but it does give you a solid way to ramp once something beefy hits play. If you have something like an Indomitable Ancients in play, 10 mana of any 1 color is a pretty decent amount of ramp. Baldin, Century Herdmaster, is a 6-mana 0/7 who has some redundancy of Felithar's primary ability. During our turn, each creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Also, whenever Baldin attacks, up to 100 target creatures get +0/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in hand. This card is so funny. You did read that right. 100 target creatures get buffed booties based on the bulk of your hand. With the right cards in play, this can end games quickly. We will discuss those cards later, but this is perhaps the strongest buff ability in the deck. It's also important to note that Baldin, unlike our commander, causes all creatures to calculate damage based on toughness. Canopy Gargantuan is a 7/7 for 7 mana with both Flying and Word 2. This means that opponents' spells and abilities will be countered when they target the Gargantuan unless they pay an additional 2 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a number of +1/+1 counters onto each other creature you control equal to that creature's toughness. This is another game ender type of card. We already are on creatures with high toughness. Basically doubling their toughness every turn is going to get out of hand very quickly, and while it won't give itself any +1/+1 counters, it having Ward 2 as inherent protection will keep it around for quite a while. Reunion of the House is a 7-mana sorcery. We return any number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. We then exile a Reunion of the House. This is a powerful reanimation spell for this deck, and in some ways acts as a sorcery variant of the legendary creature Nethroi, Apex of Death. This deck does have some aristocrat stylings, such as Felithar letting us sacrifice our creatures for value, and having a way to get them all back to the battlefield at once is very efficient. Since we can reanimate any number of creatures so long as their combined power is 10 or less, and our deck is primarily low power creatures, this can have a very large scale. Tipping the Scales is a free mana sorcery that requires we sacrifice a creature. When we do, all creatures get -X/-X until the end of turn, where X is the sacrificed creature's toughness. This is a board wipe tailor-made to our deck. See, if our creatures have high toughness, we can give a huge debuff. Any creature whose toughness becomes 0 or less due to this debuff dies. Because most of our creatures will have high toughness, this might not hurt our battlefield nearly as much. Now let's look at some of the better reprints in the deck. These again will be examined from a gameplay perspective rather than a financial one, because the deck is going to be played and we want to know what's worth keeping in. Blight Pile is a 2-mana 3/3 with Defender, and has an ability that requires we pay 3 mana and tap the Blight Pile, and each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creatures with Defender we control. If we choose to bulk up more creatures with Defender in your own personal deck, this ability will scale further, and since it's hitting each opponent, it can sometimes be a better source of damage than simply attacking with it. Crashing Drawbridge can tap to give all of our creatures haste, which is great if we have a turn we can enter combat and swing for lethal. This deck frequently can enter turns where we can pivot from playing very defensively and just blocking oncoming attacks to serving up attacks of our own. Dragonlord Jamoka is a huge Elder Dragon with both flying and lifelink. The biggest aspect to this card is that it protects you from your opponent casting spells during your turn. You are safe from your opponent's instants during your turns, and with such a sizable body, you'll have quite the threat on your hands. Ikra Shadiki the Usurper gains us life based on toughness whenever we deal combat damage to a player, which, given that our creature's toughness are the focal point of this deck, this is making very relevant level of life gain. Seedborn Muse lets us untap our entire board during each player's untap step, allowing us to be at the ready to defend and respond to opponents' plays. This is a game changer card, meaning it has a large enough of impact on the game state as it enters play. Tree of Redemption, we mentioned earlier on in this video, being a 4-mana creature with 13 toughness. This creature has a unique ability where it can trade its toughness with our life total. If played before we take any damage, this can effectively give us a 0/40, which in the scope of what this deck can do, can be threatening. Sacrificing it to Felithar, while a bit risky, will let us draw 40 cards and discard 0 of them. With Ikra Shadiki, we can gain 40 life off of it, dealing combat damage. We can play some shenanigans and use it defensively, trading our current life total for whatever its current toughness is, sponging the hit from combat, and then trading the life total back the next time we can, allowing us to be much harder to kill. Even at its base printed power and toughness, it's formidable in this deck, and it's probably one of my favorite cards included. Welcoming Vampire is a valid source of card draw in this deck. Since almost all of our creatures have power 2 or less, we can reasonably guarantee that we will draw a card off of it each turn. Assault Formation is another variant of our commander's ability, nearly replicating it. This enchantment brings 2 additional abilities, allowing us to pay 1 green to let a creature with Defender attack as if it did not have Defender, and allowing us to buff the booties of our board. Again, it's very similar to Velethar, though the redundancy is extremely helpful in the event that our commander is removed enough that the commander tax makes it too expensive to recast. Behind the Scenes is a card that I consider a win condition with the deck. We will be discussing another card I recommend adding in shortly, but Skulk is one of the best abilities this deck can run. A creature with Skulk cannot be blocked by a creature with greater power. If we have a creature with 0 power attacking, it cannot be blocked at all. A creature with 1 power cannot be blocked by any creature with 2 or greater power. This can make our board state essentially unblockable given how dinky our powers become. It also carries with it an activated ability where for 5 mana, we can give our creatures +1/+1. This ability can be used at instant speed after blockers are declared or because of Skulk are unable to be declared, and grow our board to deal much more damage. So let's talk upgrades. This deck has 3 ways that you can go about branching out easily off the top of my head. You can dive into more creatures with Defender and utilize our commander's ability to let them attack. I'm not so much of a fan of that because without Velethar or a similar ability in play, we're very much SOL. You can go the route of the Ring Temptation using the cards from the Lord of the Rings set that introduce the Ring Bearer mechanic. This amps up the unblockability of our creatures and allows us to get additional value out of attacking. Finally, we can go the Skulk route and add in ways to give Skulk to our creatures. I'm going to go over 10 cards that we can add into this list to begin fine-tuning our deck. Bedrock Tortoise is a 0/6 for 4 mana that gives our creatures hexproof during our turns. Each creature with greater toughness than its power deals combat damage using its toughness. Again, we have great redundancy to our commander's ability, and granting hexproof on our turns helps us dodge removal and interaction. Betor, kin to all, is the same dragon that's shown in our alternate commander, though a different card. This variant of Betor gives us value based on the total toughnesses of our creatures. If the total toughness is 10 or more, we draw a card. If it's 20 or more, we untap our creatures. Finally, if it's 40 or more, each opponent loses half of their life, rounded up. I think this is a fantastic source of value, as we'll easily scale through those abilities, and since they are cumulative, you will get them even after you reach the next threshold. Call of the Ring is one of my favorite cards in a deck like this, though it does introduce a somewhat complicated mechanic. This 2 mana enchantment gives us an upkeep trigger where the ring tempts us. Whenever we choose a creature as our ring bearer, we may pay 2 life, and if we do, draw a card. When you are first tempted by the ring, by any ability that says such, you create an emblem called the Ring. You must choose a creature you control to be your ring bearer if you control a creature. The ring gains its abilities in the order as seen on this emblem, and it retains those abilities for the remainder of the game. Each player may only have 1 emblem named the Ring and only 1 ring bearer at a time. The abilities the ring gains are as follows. The first, your ring bearer is legendary and cannot be blocked by creatures with greater power. The second, whenever your ring bearer attacks, you draw a card and then discard a card. The third, whenever our ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. The fourth, whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. I love the interactions this introduces into the game, and on such an innocuous card, this is great value and it gives card draw. If you do choose to run this, you can explore other cards that utilize the ring mechanic. A personal favorite of mine that can go in this deck is Frodo Sauron's Bane, who has an ability that can cause an opponent dealt damage by Frodo to lose the game should the ring have tempted you 4 or more times. Definitely an interesting route to take this deck, something I will be personally exploring with my list. Catapult Fodder is a 1/5 zombie for 3 mana. At the beginning of combat on our turn, if we control 3 or more creatures who each have toughness greater than their power, we transform Catapult Fodder into Catapult Captain. This is a sack outlet that allows us to burn an opponent equal to a sacrificed creature's toughness. We're basically flinging our creatures. This plays more into the Aristocrat's theme, and if you do go this route, you can add in more themed cards like Marionette Apprentice that will want your creatures to die. Dusk to Dawn is a split card that acts as both a board wipe and a mass recursion spell. The Dusk side can be played from our hand for 4 mana, destroying all creatures in play with power 3 or greater. The Dawn side may be cast from the graveyard for 5 mana, and returns all creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. Our deck has nearly all creatures within the threshold of 2 power, and so this should work out very smoothly. I'm normally not a fan of adding in board wipes, but I think this one fits our deck very nicely, and I love modal spells. If this card makes its way to our graveyard and we do not cast the Dusk side, we can still use the Dawn side from the graveyard, giving extra utility even if you don't get to use the Wrath effect. Raving Dead is a 5 mana 2/6 with Death Touch. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we choose opponents at random, and the Raving Dead attacks that player this combat if able. If it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. This is a very strong element of chaos, just randomly lashing out at an opponent with severe consequence. Combat damage is assigned all at once, and so if your other creatures got their turn hitting your opponent, after all of their life loss from combat is calculated, they then lose half their life from the Raving Dead. One of the reasons I added this to the deck is that it fits in nicely with the low power, high toughness design, having a whopping 6 toughness to make up for its measly 2 power. This will be easier to deal more damage, and with some of the other mechanics of the deck, that 2 power might grant it a greater chance of unblockability. Sapling of Kulfanor is a 5 mana Tree Folk Shaman and one of my favorite commanders in its own deck. She is indestructible, which can make her a great deck in her own right, pairing her with something like World Slayer. The relevant part of this card for our deck is her attack trigger, which reveals the top card of our library. If it's a creature card, we gain life equal to its toughness, and then lose life equal to its power and add it to our hand. This is, in some ways, card draw and card advantage, and because how many of our creatures are built into this deck, we will almost always be gaining more life than we lose. Skeleton Key is the most important card you can consider adding to this deck. This 1 mana artifact equipment gives the equipped creature Skulk. Whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and if you do, discard a card. This is fantastic to help us get through with cards like our commander, which giving unblockability to opens up the possibility of a commander damage win. Remember, you only need to deal 21 points of damage with a commander to take a player out. If you do go this route and you want to build your deck to be extra lethal, maybe consider some infect or poison to the strategy. These 2 keywords utilize poison counters, which if a player has 10 or more poison counters on them, they lose the game. Something like Grafted Exoskeleton is great to give the equipped creature +2/+2 in infect, meaning they won't deal combat damage per se, but will give poison counters equal to the damage they would have dealt instead. Remember that 0-13 Tree of Redemption? Give it infect and it can one-shot an opponent. Smile at Death is an enchantment that also helps the Aristocrat strategy, letting you bring up to 2 creatures with power 2 or less from your graveyard back to the battlefield, and then they each get a +1/+1 counter. This is a very passive but helpful reanimation spell, and it's solid to help reanimate some creatures we sacrifice to cards such as Felithar. Since we're getting up to 2, we can choose to only get 1, or we can get both depending on the context we're in. Lastly, and the one card I'm only recommending because its friend is in the deck as well, Tree of Perdition. We have Tree of Redemption, which trades our life total for its toughness. Tree of Perdition does the opposite, swapping its toughness with the life total of an opponent. This can be a lot scarier since opponents dropping to 13 life all at once by something that can attack them puts them into range of being taken out in one shot. This also could give us a 0-40 that can one-shot another opponent, and given how easily we can give it unblockability can make this a very big threat. Now, I will end this by saying that none of the cards that I've mentioned are required to play the deck well. If you pilot this deck just using your personal pet cards or an entirely different approach to the deck that I put here, more power to you. Some of these cards can get pretty pricey, and so if you don't have the ability to get these at a good deal, or if your playgroup won't allow proxies, it's totally okay to swap something else out. In upgrading your list, you will want to look at the mana curve of your list. If you have too many higher mana values such as Zetalpa, Primal Dawn, or some of the board wipes that you don't think quite contribute enough to the deck strategy, or if you think 38 lands might be too many and want to cut out one or two, the decision is really up to you. Now, while I didn't mention it in my upgrade section, I think that I prefer the talisman cycle of mana rocks to the signets that are coming in the deck. They cost the same amount of mana, though they only produce 1 mana of either color you choose. Maybe you want more interaction and you want to cut a few creatures to make room. Remember, you are responsible for the cards that you're choosing to put into your deck, just as you are also responsible for the experience of play that the table gets from the deck. Building a fun commander deck that will play to your preferences and run smoothly is a great experience, and these precon decks are a fantastic way to get that ball rolling. If you have any advice on how you took your Abzan armor deck, feel free to share it below. This video can serve as a great resource to other players who are wanting to start playing this deck, and your advice can be an absolutely valuable asset to a newer deck builder. Anyway, that'll wrap up our look at the Abzan armor list. This is my personal favorite of the Tarkir lists. Abzan is my favorite of the color combinations, and I do hope that it may be yours as well. If you enjoyed this video, likes, shares, and comments are some of the best ways to help us get the word out there. If you're new here and want to keep up to date with all of our future projects, subscribe with notifications so you never miss a beat. As always, I'm Flynn, thanks for watching.